Have you ever caught a police officer lying in court? 1. Yes, my husband was pulled over by police and charged with DUI. They didn't do a blood test or breathalyzer. Don't know why. We still ended up in court. Hubby had drunk a beer, but wasn't drunk at the time. They kept insisting he had driven over the curb and onto a sidewalk and failed the sobriety test where you have to walk a straight line. My husband has a bad leg due to an accident many years ago, has balance issues because of it and can't walk a straight line. After I bailed him out, hubby told me there was no way he drove up a curb because there wasn't one on that road. This was in an industrial zone and there were no curbs or sidewalks because it was all sloped driveways leading off the street into factory lots. He said when he saw the cruiser lights come on he pulled into the driveway of one of the factories. So we went to the street and took photographs. When we kept the court date, our lawyer questioned the two officers about what they saw, asked them if they were sure he had driven up on the curb, asked if their report with the address where they pulled him over was accurate. They both swore yes it was. Then our lawyer produced the photographs of that street. No curbs and no sidewalks. Case dismissed. But it still cost us a lot of money for that defense lawyer. 2. Yup, my oldest son had a full count on his driving record, and one more would cost him his license. So when he got pulled over, he panicked. He told the cop he left his wallet home. The cop asked his name and address. He gave them his younger brother's information since he knew all the answers. Then he left town and kind of disappeared. Meantime they came after my youngest son for the ticket and failure to appear. He went down to the police station and explained he was not the one who got the ticket, instead it was his brother. The cop who wrote the ticket came out and accused him of lying. He looked him in the eye and said he remembered him and he was the one who got the ticket. My youngest wasn't one to take this lying down and hired an attorney to fight it. I tried getting through to the cop myself, but he arrogantly proclaimed him guilty and I was stupid for believing his story. At trial, he got on the stand and when asked to identify the person, he pointed to my son and said it was him. Meantime I approached the prosecutor and pulled out a picture of my oldest son. I showed it to her and she looked at it, then my son, and said they look like twins. I said not really, but they are often mistaken for each other. But this cop refused to even consider he'd been duped. My son even had an alibi for the night in question. I told her, he got this wrong and just won't even consider the truth. I said, it's my other son you need to go after, not this one. She was very reasonable and moved to dismiss. The cop was astonished. She explained to the court it was a case of mistaken identity. After the dismissal the cop had the balls to come to me and ask for my other son's location. He didn't even apologize for putting the wrong person through this. I looked him in the eye and told him, you got up there on that stand and swore under oath that he was guilty. Now you see you made a mistake. Instead of apologizing you asked me to help to arrest my other son. So you can go find him yourself, you will get no help from me. He was visibly angry and said this wasn't the end of it. He asked the court to swear out a warrant for my other son. After the embarrassing show in court, the DA told him he had his chance and blew it. They wouldn't waste the court's time with it anymore. 3. Yes, as a juror, the defendant had pled guilty to driving while intoxicated, and for evading arrest, slow speed pursuit, but was pleading innocent to the charge of attempted homicide of a police officer. The officer in question swore that the defendant intentionally hit him with his vehicle as the officer was approaching it. There was extensive dash cam and body cam footage of the entire chase sequence that we had to view, while several officers narrated the events recorded in their footage. When we got to the part where the defendant allegedly hit the officer with his car, the officer's body cam footage clearly showed the defendant's vehicle driving at about 2 miles per hour around the officer, giving at least 3 feet of room, and the officer leaning towards the vehicle and striking it with his open palm on the hood. It made a loud noise on the video. The officer swore that the sound was the vehicle striking him on the hip and thigh area, therefore the attempted homicide charge, and that he was seriously injured by it. But the video clearly showed it was the officer who slapped the car, and that the distance between the car and the officer's body was never within 2 feet of the car, and that the officer ran after the car for about 15-20 feet. He was clearly lying about that particular portion of the events in an effort to jack up the charges, which would bring a mandatory life sentence to the defendant. The frightening thing here was that our jury room initially voted 8-4 to convict the defendant. Thankfully, the judge allowed us to review the video in the jury room, so we could more clearly see, in super slow motion, the part of the video in question. There was no doubt that it was the officer who hit the defendant's car, and that he was never in any real danger. Afterwards, the ADA who prosecuted the case asked to speak to the jury, and thanked us for serving, and for rendering the not guilty verdict. We asked why she even brought the case to trial, since the officer was clearly lying. She said that as a member of the DA's team, she had to do what the DA told her, and that no DA could be elected in our county unless he or she had the full support of the police department. Therefore, they left it to the jury to see that justice was done. Not the first time our justice system has left a sour taste in my mouth. 4. Well, I was going to, but the judge asked him a few questions and ruined my fun. You see, there was a light they liked to wait it because they knew the yellow was too short. You couldn't possibly stop in time and the city made a lot of money off it. He pulled me over and I took the ticket. Then before my court date my license expired. Because I was a surgical resident it was hard to get time off and I ended up having to take the written and behind the wheel test. It was a blessing beyond words. As I looked through the rules book they had the minimum number of feet it took to stop at each speed and how long that usually took. Since I knew the light was too short, I borrowed a stopwatch and timed it. Then I worked out the math of how long it would have taken to stop and showed that it couldn't be done as the light was timed. The judge must have liked me. I was in a city court and I swear the only non-drug addict, pimp, or prostitute LOL. He first asked the cop if I was speeding and I thought, damn he's going to ruin my fun. The cop said no and I knew he was screwed. Then the judge asked him if he could see me when the light went yellow and he said yes, which was a lie. He was hiding behind a wall and could only see the light. I was angry that he lied but the judge then asked him how far away from the light I was when it turned yellow and he said 50 feet. Bah ha ha. I had the actual rules of the road book with me, saying at the speed on that road it would take 150 feet for me to stop. Since the judge had asked the speed on that road, I knew the judge already knew the exact distance it would take to stop. The judge asked me if I had any questions and I laughed and said that he was welcome to look at my stopwatch readings and that the rules of the road book clearly stated for the speed limit there it would take 150 feet to stop. The judge looked at the cop and said she's completely right. I suspect the judge warned them to stop it at that spot because the light was changed and no more cops after that LOL. And my boss couldn't believe I beat the ticket by myself in a city court LMBO. 5. Had gotten pulled over for a supposed tail light out. Informed officer that my vehicle has an indicator, which alerts me to any light out. Asked officer which light was out. He responded with a tail light. I asked which side, passenger or driver? He responded again with a tail light, and was getting aggravated. So, he gave me a ticket. I went to my destination and had my passenger move to the driver's seat. I had them turn on the lights, took a picture with date and time stamp. No lights out. Turn on turn signals, recorded, date and time stamp. Press the brakes, no lights out. Took picture, date and time stamp. Court date came, as I was prepared with my evidence. The cop lied, saying I was driving erraticate, failed to signal turn, ect. So, I asked the officer, do you have dash cam of said violations? He replied that it wasn't available. Asked officer, if I had committed all the violations you swore, under oath, that I did. Why did you give me a ticket for a tail light? He was a bit uncomfortable. Responded with, I was letting you off easy. My next question, really put into question his motives. I asked, so, you decided, with all the violations you stated, failed to perform a sobriety test, and write the violations on a ticket? I presented my pictures as evidence, showing no signs of lights out. The case was dismissed, but asked the judge, is the officer going to be arrested for lying under oath? There was an awkward silence. I was told by the judge that my case was dismissed, and there is no further reason to discuss anything beyond that. So, cops can lie to the public, on their reports and under oath, without repercussions. Until that changes, innocent citizens will continue to be targeted. 6. Yes, as a 16-year-old, I had my fairly new license and was driving my parents' car when a deer darted out in front of me. I swerved and put the car into a ditch. Not hurt. I find a phone and call a tow truck. Get back to the car and there is a police car there. I explained I'd stayed with the car for 15 minutes but knew there was a gas station nearby. He gives me a ticket for speeding because in his opinion that's the only way this could have happened. Now this is a small municipal court for traffic tickets. My license was from my parents' home 3 hours away. He was expecting me to just mail in the fine rather than contest it. He approached me before court to refresh his memory about the event and naively I did. He gets called and testifies that I was speeding. So, I asked him where he was when the accident happened and was able to witness me speeding. He said he'd passed me going in the opposite direction. So, I asked if you saw me speeding in the opposite direction, saw me wreck my car. Why did I have to walk 20 minutes to the phone, call police headquarters to report the accident, and walk back before you wrote the ticket? The judge stopped things at that point, dismissed the charges. 7. Yes, a TX state trooper lied on the stand. Now I could be gracious and call him mistaken because he had simply read the misinformation on the ticket, except he told this beautifully crafted story of how remembered that he had clocked me going eastbound coming up a hill. I let him go on with the lies and then get off the stand without asking him anything. I take the stand and start off saying how I wished I had known he was going to tell that story because if I had known, I'd have brought the receipt from the sandwich shop I had eaten breakfast at and that I'd have brought the time slip from the customer I had visited after that stop to show that I was indeed heading westbound. I then indicated that based on what he had just said, that was all that needed to be proven to show that the trooper wasn't being truthful and sat back down. The prosecutor then recalled the trooper to refute his own testimony and there was a whole bunch of back forth about how he had been reading from a report that was produced while they had done an written ticket to digital conversion and the info must have been transposed during the data conversion. The prosecutor then has the trooper then retell his lies now that he knows the correct direction. I start to get this huge grin because the question that is racing through my head is, were you lying earlier or now? I can't wait to ask him that, but the grin tips my hand to the judge and she cuts him off and says, case dismissed.